Namaskar friends, I am Anil Kohli, insolvency professional. Today I'll try to share the knowledge which I have gained through experiences in the various processes under the code. So today's topic is contents of the resolution plan and its approval. However, I'll take you through some basics of insolvency and its resolution. So insolvency basically is the situation of commitment of default in payment of the dues owed by the corporate debtor. So whenever a person or a corporate debtor is not able to clear his dues, that situation will be called insolvency. And the resolution is the bringing out that person or the corporate debtor from that situation of default. Basically, the resolution entails three situations. First is the diagnosis of the cause of the default. And the second would be the identification of the treatment for that cause. And third is the real process of this treatment. So the resolution plan, it's a document enlisting all the three above things, which is the cause of the default, then the identification of the problem, and the treatment, and thirdly the process of its treatment, which will be the implementation of the plan. So today's topic is contents of resolution plan. Now I will take you through the various legal provisions in this regard. First of all, coming to the definitions, as I have explained you, this is the definition given by Oxford Dictionary. Insolvency is the state of not having enough money to pay what you owe, an occasion when it happens. This is Oxford Dictionary's definition. And resolution is the act of solving or settling a problem, disagreement, etc. This definition has also been given by Oxford Dictionary. Then comes the situation of resolution plan. So as per section 526, the resolution plan means a plan proposed by resolution applicant for insolvency resolution of the corporate debtor as a going concern in accordance with the part 2. So for removal of doubts, it is clear that the resolution plan may include the provisions for restructuring of the corporate debtor, including by way of merger, amalgamation, or demerger. Basically, friends, the resolution plan will generally include management change. Since the earlier management had not been able to handle the affairs of the corporate debtor, due to which this position has reached that the corporate debtor is under the default. So the resolution plan basically will provide for measures like which have been enlisted in Regulation 37. The Regulation 37 provides the basics of the resolution plan. So the resolution plan of a corporate debtor for maximization of its value of the assets will include the following. First is transfer all the or part of the assets of the corporate debtor to one or more persons. Then will be the sale or part or all assets, whether subject to any security interest or not. The substantial acquisition of shares of the corporate debtor is the third thing. So by means of which we will change the management of the corporate debtor. Or there may be a merger or consolidation of corporate debtor, since there may be some institution which is already in the same business that may merge this corporate debtor into its own entity, and there will be a new entity which will run smoothly and will have no default. And then is cancellation or delisting of shares of the corporate debtor. So satisfaction or modification of security interest. Since, as you are aware, that the resolution plan basically would try to bring out the company out of the default, and basically what will happen is that in this process, they will try to take it at a real value, and with the real things which are not, against the required issues, required assets, or required valuation, which is good for running of the corporate debtor smoothly in the future at least. And there will be another thing, curing or waiving of any breach of the terms of any debt due from the corporate debtor. Then reduction in the amount payable to the creditors, that will be another thing. Then is extension of a maturity date or a change in interest rate or other terms of the debt due from the corporate debtor. Since generally what happens, friends, generally the issue comes is when a corporate debtor is burdened with a debt which is not consonant to the size of the corporate debtor, which is not consonant to the earnings or revenues of the corporate debtor. There may be higher investments in the fixed assets. There may be lower working funds left for the working capital. Therefore, to take out the corporate debtor from such a situation, generally what is done is the debts instruments or the earlier contracts or the earlier assets, these are the technological issues are corrected by way of a resolution plan. So these, as I have told you, these are the things like an amendment of constitutional documents of corporate debtor, which may also bring out the corporate debtor from the situation of this, issue of the default. This is another. Then the issue of securities of corporate debtor for cash or property securities or in exchange of claims or interest and or other appropriate purpose. Then is change in portfolio of goods or services produced by the corporate debtor. Maybe certain goods are not as per the standards of the market. There may be an advancement in the requirements of the consumers. So there may be, the resolution plan may include such a statement of change of the nature of the goods or services. And then, as I told you, the change in technology, that is another big issue due to which certain corporate debtors have come into default, like CDs. These were running earlier. Now there is no requirement of CDs, and generally it's all on the web, the OneDrive, or these are the modes of storages. So the CD business will fail in such an circumstance. Then is obtaining approvals, necessary approvals from the central or state government or other authorities. This may also be one of the proposals in the resolution plan. Then comes, friends, the regulation 38, which provides the mandatory contents of the resolution plan. And the contents basically are the amount due to the operational creditors under the resolution plan shall be given priority in payment over financial creditors. It does not mean that the operational creditors have to be paid their entire dues in priority. Generally, it is specified further, we will come to that in the regulation, that the operational creditors, their liquidation value owed to them must be paid in priority. And also sometimes, the resolution applicant, he may feel that he requires certain operational creditors necessarily for the smooth running of the corporate debtor, like transporters. Generally if the local transporters are not paid in time, so then there may be an issue in running of the business and they may not provide services. Sometimes electricity dues, there are issues if you do not have cleared the dues of the electricity. So these kinds of situations, these will depend on the resolution applicant, how much he wants to pay, but the minimum is the liquidation value. Then is the resolution plan shall include a statement as to how it has dealt with the interest of all stakeholders, including financial creditors and operational creditors of the corporate debtor. And a resolution plan shall provide the terms of the plan and its implementation schedule, that is definitely required, how much time it will need to make the entire payment till the handover of the corporate debtor, what is the term of the plan, how much time it will need to change the technology or the goods or services. These kinds of issues may be are the required contents of the resolution plan. Then is the management and control of the business of the corporate debtor during its term. So basically, that CRP ends when the plan is approved, and till the handover of the CD to the resolution applicant, there is an interim term. So during which generally what happens is the monitoring committee comes into play, and the monitoring committee will consist of basically the resolution applicant himself, the financial creditor, and the resolution professional or any other person appointed as a monitoring professional who will jointly supervise the affairs. Like in the next provision, it is adequate means of supervising its implementation. So these are the mandatory contents of a resolution plan. Then comes to the 38.3, which says a resolution plan shall demonstrate that it addresses the cause of the default. As I have told you in the beginning, that the identification of the cause of default is the basic requirement. Otherwise, if we do not know the disease itself, the cure would be very difficult. So, and it should demonstrate that it is feasible and viable, and this has happened in various matters, that the resolution applicant has not been able to implement the plan given by him, and therefore it is a mandatory requirement that the COC examines that it is feasible and it would be viable to be implemented. It should not happen that the RA fails and again there is a default situation, which will be not good for the process itself and for the economy also. Then it must have a provision for its effective implementation, that is through the monitoring committee generally. Then it has the provision for approvals required and the timeline for the same. The resolution applicant has the capability to implement the resolution plan. Then again, which I am saying that they have some resolution applicants have not been able to fulfill their own commitments or their own proposal. Therefore, it is now being seen very seriously that he should also have the capability to implement it. Then coming to the sections, these were the regulation. Coming to the section 30. It says about submission of the resolution plan. Basically, the process of submission of resolution plan is entailed here. First is the resolution applicant may submit a resolution plan along with an affidavit stating that he is eligible under section 29A. This has been introduced to avoid the owners coming again into the resolution process and taking over the CD through back door. So this provision has been brought in by way of an ordinance earlier, then it was enacted as an enactment. So, to the resolution professional prepared on the basis of information memorandum. So, affidavit is one requirement and the information memorandum another important document which gives all the details about the corporate debtor. So, the resolution applicant can take help of the information memorandum to get the required information about the earlier issues with the corporate debtor, its entire assets or the financial strength. So, he can plan his further process of taking further the corporate debtor into a solvent situation by means of this information and incorporating into his plan. So, the resolution professional has to examine each and every plan received by him to confirm that each resolution plan. So, before that I would like to add on, there is another section which is section 25. So, as per section 25, we have to submit all the plans before the committee of creditors, whether compliant or not. So, we generally what we do is we put before the committee all the sealed envelopes or the password protected financial bids, so that to ensure the transparency for the financial creditors, they are aware that fine, there has not been any misdealing in the process, and the plans are opened before the committee and then the basics are read out, and at this stage only the resolution applicant gives his presentation so that to inspire the confidence of the committee members. So generally on this first meeting after the receipt of the plan, the plans are open and the presentation is done before the committee of creditors to inspire their confidence that yes, there is a person who can take out the corporate debtor out of this situation of default. So then after this, section 30 subsection 2, which gives the basic requirements for the resolution plan, this is the most important section, that the resolution professional has to ensure that it provides for in payment of insolvency resolution process costs in a manner specified by the board in priority to the payment of other debts of the corporate debtor. Then IRP costs are the first priority. Then it must provide for the debts of operational creditor in such manner as may be specified by the board, which shall not be less than the amount to be paid to the creditors in the event of liquidation of the corporate debtor under section 53. So basically, as I was telling you, the liquidation value must be ensured to the operational creditors so that they are not put in a position which is worse than the liquidation stage. What happens is the operational creditors are not a party for voting. They cannot vote to the plan. So therefore, to safeguard their interest, to protect their interest, the law has provided by itself that they should be ensured at least the amount which had been received by them in the stage of liquidation, which is the worst possible scenario under this insolvency and bankruptcy code. So second is the amount which would have been paid had the amount to be distributed under the resolution plan. Basically, whatever has been provided under the plan. So whichever is higher out of the two, the liquidation value to the operational creditors or the amount to be paid to them as per the plan. So whichever will be higher will be generally paid to them in the plan. And then is then the amount which shall be paid to the creditors in as per section 53. Again, the priority is described under the waterfall mechanism, which is section 53, which comes into play in the stage of insolvency. However, the law has now incorporated in the resolution process also, so that the priority of the creditors is maintained and the resolution applicant is not able to do certain adjustments for securing the votes. He may give preference to one of the creditor, one of the financial creditor for seeking his vote. So to safeguard all these things, the law has now incorporated the waterfall mechanism in the resolution process also. So explanation says that for removal of doubts, it is clarified that a distribution in accordance with the provisions of this clause shall be fair and equitable to such creditors. So law is depending on the morals of the COC and the resolution applicant also, resolution professional, so that fair and equitable distribution is done to the creditors. Then second explanation is given that this is regarding some Amendment Act 2019. So this all these provisions will apply to the plans if at all still pending, for approval. So to those processes also, this provision will be applicable. If the plan has not been approved or rejected, but it is lying with the adjudicating authority, then we have to apply these provisions and get the plan modified accordingly. Then is where an appeal has been preferred against under section 61, 62, and such appeal is not time barred under provision. So there also this provision will be applicable. Or wherein a legal proceeding has been initiated and in court against the decision of adjudicating authority in respect of resolution plan, there in such situation also these provisions and the plan has to be modified as per the requirements of the law under section 30 subsection 2. So all such plans. And then third requirement is it shall provide for the management of affairs of the corporate debtor after approval of the resolution plan. That is also a requirement. The implementation and supervision of the plan, as we have discussed, monitoring committee. Then is it does not contravene any of the provisions of the law for the time being enforced. So that means all the entire laws of the country have been to be taken care of in the resolution plan. There should not be breach of any law by way of any terms of the resolution plan. So the laws have to be protected, and the resolution professional has to examine these facts also before submitting the plan further for approval before the committee. Then is it shall conform to the requirements as may be specified by the board. So regulations have also to be adhered to. So since the board, as you know, specifies under the regulations. So for the purpose of this clause, if any approval of shareholders is required under the Companies Act or any other law for the time being in force, for the implementation of actions of the resolution plan, such approval shall be deemed to have been obtained. So what happens is the ownership of a corporate debtor will be through the shareholding. So in this provision, it has been ensured that the corporate debtors, shareholders should not come in between the implementation of the plan. The resolution professional now, section 30 subsection 3, wherein the resolution professional submits the plan for final approval of the committee after ensuring all the compliances with the compliance certificate. So the COC may approve the plan. Now comes to the approval. So up to subsection 30, subsection 3, the contents of the resolution plan were there. Now after submission of the plan comes the approval. So COC will approve the plan by 66% majority, and after considering the feasibility and viability, as I told you, and the manner of distribution proposed as per section 53(1), and priority of the security interest has also to be kept in mind. So, and the COC shall not approve a plan submitted before ordinance. So, this is not relevant because 29A has to be adhered to. So, it's old 2017 ordinance. So, now second provision shall not be construed to be extension of period. Basically, there is a requirement that if at all the plan was pending since before 2017, so in such a scenario, 30 days will be allowed to the RA to cure that defect. It happened happened in SR Steel's matter, wherein the ArcelorMittal was provided an opportunity to cure the default of Galva Steel, so Galva Uttam Steel, so that this provision was applied there. So that the eligibility as amended by ordinance will also apply to the resolution applicant who has submitted the plan before 2018. Then the resolution applicant has to be allowed to attend the meeting. Yeah, for negotiations he is required, but he will not have a right to vote there. And the resolution professional shall submit the plan. Now COC has approved it, so the resolution professional will finally go to the adjudicating authority under section 30 subsection 6. Then is approval of the plan by the adjudicating authority. It is covered under section 31. So if the adjudicating authority, first, it is satisfied with that all the compliances of code and regulations have been met, and secondly, it is sure that it will be effectively implemented, that the plan is implementable. In such scenario, the adjudicating authority will approve the plan, and it will also see that after the order of the adjudicating authority, the plan will become binding on all concerned stakeholders, including the central government, state government, local authority, corporate debtor, its employees, members, creditors, and for all the payment of dues will be as per the plan only. So the income tax department or sales tax department cannot ask for their dues after the approval of plan. So where the adjudicating authority is satisfied that the resolution plan does not conform to the requirements, then it will reject the plan. And then 31.3, after that approval of plan, what happens is moratorium ceases to have effect. Then all records are to be submitted by the RP to the board. Then the resolution applicant shall, pursuant to the plan, obtain all the required approvals within a period of 1 year. Then friends, regulations give the process of approval under regulation 39, that the prospective resolution applicant only whose name is there in the final list can submit the plan. So the list is prepared after receipt of expression of interest, for which Form G is published. So the resolution will be given by only the resolution applicant in final list. He has to give an affidavit under 29A and also an undertaking by the PRA that all the information and records provided in connection with the plan is true and correct, and discovery of any information and record at any time which is wrong or incorrect will render him ineligible, and his refundable deposited by him will be forfeited, and also he will be liable for criminal action, penal action under the concerned laws. Then the resolution professional may, if envisages in the resolution plan, allow modification of the resolution plan, the modification, but only once. So basically what happens is, once a plan is submitted to the committee, there are negotiations amongst the committee members as well as the RA, and then after the negotiations, a final revised plan may be received from the RA, which will be put for approval. Then the RP can use a challenge mechanism also to enable the resolution applicants to improve their plans to enhance the value of the corporate debtor. Committee shall not consider any resolution plan received after time specified by the committee under regulation 36B, or received from person whose name is not there in the final list of PRAs, or which does not comply with the section 30 subsection 2 requirements. Then RP shall submit to the committee all resolution plan which comply with the requirements of the code and regulations, and along with the details of these avoidance applications, which are preferential under 43, undervalued transaction under 45, extortionate under 50, or fraudulent transactions under 66, and the orders, if any, received from the adjudicating authority regarding the avoidance applications. The committee will then evaluate the plans and grant them scoring as per the evaluation metrics, which will be applicable, which will be required only for the tiebreaker formula. We will discuss it later. And a committee will record the deliberations on feasibility and viability of each resolution plan. then vote on all the plans, resolution plans simultaneously. Where only one plan is put to vote, then if it is approved by 66%, fine, it is approved. Then two or more are put to vote, then the highest vote gainer will be considered as approved. However, the situation arises where two or more plans are having equal votes. Then in such a situation, there is a requirement of tiebreaker formula. So generally what is done is the scoring as per evaluation matrix is referred to in such a situation, and the H1 who has gained the maximum score as per the evaluation matrix, his plan is put for is considered to be approved and given to the adjudicating authority for approval. Here a demonstration has been made how the scoring is done. So basically if plan 1A gets 55 and B gets 60, then B will be approved 70 and 75. Then also B is scoring higher. Then but 75 and 75, here is the requirement. If two plans have got 75, 75, then requirement of tiebreaker formula. Then is the resolution professional shall endeavour to submit the resolution plan for which is approved by the committee before the adjudicating authority at least 15 days before the expiry of the CARP. And the resolution professional will forward the copy of the order of adjudicating authority approving or rejecting the plan to the participant and the resolution applicant. Then also the resolution professional within 15 days of approval of the adjudicating authority will intimate each claimant and the principal or formulae as the case may be for payment of debts under such plan. So we will inform that how your debts are being proposed to be paid under the plan to each and every claimant. So, so all the concerned stakeholders are being informed by the RP that this plan has been now approved by the adjudicating authority, and this is binding on you, by means of which the RA will also be safeguarded from further harassment by the authorities. So this regulation applies to all, yeah. Then a provision which will otherwise require consent of members or partners will deem to have been, as I have told you. No proceeding will be initiated against the IRP or RP for actions under good faith, then or for the actions which have been conducted by the corporate debtor prior to insolvency commencement. Then a person in charge of management and control after a resolution plan then is approved, then he can seek district administration's help also for the purposes required. Then the creditor, if he is aggrieved by the non-implementation of the resolution plan, may apply to adjudicating authority for directions. Friends, these were the provisions, legal provisions, which are relevant for the contents of resolution plan and its approval. One subject is there, which is negotiations. So negotiation play a very important role, in this process for maximization of value of the corporate debtor. So negotiations generally will include the financial consideration improvement, and then it will also, there can be negotiation regarding the term and duration of the resolution plan, which is aimed at reducing the quantum and duration of deferred payment. And negotiations can also be regarding the conditions precedents. So there may be certain conditions precedent which are not acceptable to the committee. So these can also be eliminated by way of negotiations. Then plan can be made compliant with mandatory contents of the code. Then some clarifications may be sought, or maybe some terms may be improved by the resolution plan. So thank you very much, friends. This is from me about the resolution plan and its approval. Jai Hind. Thank you, friends.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. S.K. Gupta. Today I am going to discuss overview and importance of valuation under insolvency and bankruptcy court. You would all tend to agree with me that the world is changing, and the world is changing very, very dramatically and very, very significantly. I am not only referring to the last 2 years when the world as a whole has been faced with unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic situation, but even otherwise, if you look back 2 or 3 decades, there have been very, very significant changes that have taken place in this world which have changed the way we live our life and also the way we work in different organizations. It's a VUCA world. The world is highly volatile, especially the business and economic world is highly volatile, very uncertain, hugely complex, and very, very ambiguous. And such a dynamic business and economic environment, the businesses have to be very, very agile. They have to be governed by various appropriate laws. And end of the day, they have to become sustainable with a view to providing various products and services which are required by the people living on this planet. In this business world today, we have lots of new age companies or startups which are mushrooming all over the world, including India. India today has more than 100 unicorns. We are second only to Silicon Valley of the US in terms of number of startups which are happening here. But if you look at the performance of these new age companies or even the well-established old companies, we find that many of the companies have cashless turnover or profitless turnover. They have a good enough top line, but end of the day, there is no profit. Or there is cashless profit. They have a good enough bottom line, but end of the day, there is no cash or liquidity available. But in spite of such bad financial condition, these companies today in the marketplace enjoy huge soaring valuations. very high valuations are being enjoyed by these companies, which unfortunately, for whatever reason, are not so doing very well in terms of their financial position or financial standing. What happens that when the market forces are at play, or when the market is governed by the market forces of demand and supply and the customer demand and customer expectations, it is but natural that some of the businesses may not be able to survive in the marketplace for a long period of time, and there might be some failing businesses. At that point of time, what is required is we need a law by which we can pull out resources which somehow get stuck in inefficient uses, pull them out, put them back into productive channels for the benefit of overall economy or the country as a whole. Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 was passed for the specific purpose of rescuing failing but viable companies. Failing but viable companies. Those companies which might have failed, might be in the failing state as of today, maybe because of technological change, maybe because of poor management, maybe because of financial problems, whatever be the reason, but if they are rescuable, if it is possible to rescue them, full effort is being made to rescue them and put them back onto the path of recovery. That is the key objective that we have in terms of the IBC. The various objectives of IBC that we have are, it provides timely resolution for the distress of the companies. It tries to maximize the value of the assets of the company. It also seeks to promote entrepreneurship, because somebody who wants to become an entrepreneur essentially requires three kinds of freedom. Freedom of entry. It should be easy to enter into any business. Freedom of continuation. It should be easy to carry on the business. And finally and lastly, why not? Freedom to fail, freedom to exit. That's what is being provided by Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Another objective is promoting credit in the marketplace. The banks and financial institutions, they'll be more encouraged to provide credit to the companies in case they know that they have some kind of a way out. In case a company gets into some kind of an economic or financial problem, they have some way out to recover their amounts due from them, and that's where IBC comes into play. And the last objective is balancing the interest of all the stakeholders. That's the key. When a company gets into a failing situation or a situation of distress, there are shareholders of the company, there are creditors, operational creditors, financial creditors, employees, government, society, the various stakeholders. IBC seeks to balance the interest of various stakeholders while trying to provide resolution of a company in distress in a time-bound manner while balancing the interest of all the stakeholders. Valuation is key in the whole aspect or concept of IBC. Because when you try to arrive at resolution of a company in distress, you have to identify a resolution applicant who is going to submit a bid for taking over that company henceforth and trying to give it a fresh lease of life. How much worth the company has at that point of time when a company gets into a situation of distress is the key. And for that matter, the company is required to be valued as per the provisions of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. But let's first understand what valuation is all about. When you go to a market to buy anything, the seller quotes you a price. You don't take out your wallet and pay whatever is being asked for by the seller. हम ये नहीं करते हैं. We don't do that. We try to negotiate. We try to haggle. And then we end up or try to pay the price where the price and the value of the product is balanced in our mind. As an economic rational person, we always try to balance the price and the value. And therefore, there is a well-known quote by Warren Buffett which says, "Price is what you pay, value is what you get." When you go to a market to buy a product, maybe you decide to buy a shirt, there are branded shirts available and there are unbranded shirts available. A branded shirt would be costly, but with better design, better stitching, better cloth. But a local shirt would be less costly. Design may not be all that modern. Cloth also may not be all that very good. But then it depends. What is the value that you're seeking to derive from that particular product, and then you decide whether to buy a local shirt or a branded shirt. Price also differs from person to person. Value also differs from person to person. That is why we say value lies in the eyes of the beholder. Who is the person looking at valuing a particular asset? It differs from person to person because value lies in the eyes of the beholder. In the context of IBC, the provisions of the code mention that all the various assets of the corporate debtor are required to be valued by valuers who are registered valuers, and they are to be appointed 7th day and 47th day. In between this particular time period, from the time an RP takes over the company, they are required to be appointed between 7th and 47th day. There are 3 registered valuer asset classes that we have. We need to have registered valuers for valuing land and building, plant and machinery, securities of financial assets. For each one of these asset classes, we need to engage 2 registered valuers. Valuation of assets is the key, because if the valuation is not proper, or if the valuation of corporate debtor in distress is not appropriate, we may end up in a situation where an unviable firm, a failing and unviable firm, might still be rescued. Or vice versa, a failing and viable firm might also get into liquidation. Both of these are not social and economically desirable outcomes. Therefore, it is very essential that the corporate debtor in distress, the company under the IBC process or CIRP, must be appropriately valued so as to provide appropriate justification for a particular value to be assigned for the takeover of the company by a new person, the resolution applicant, so that he can take care of the company going forward. What is valuation? Valuation is the process of determining the economic worth of an asset or a liability. Of course, we have to make various assumptions while valuing an asset, and there are various constraints and limiting conditions, and all that depends upon availability of data as on the valuation date. Valuation is a process of estimating the potential worth of an asset or a liability or a business enterprise. It's only an estimate of value, because the asset that you're going to acquire today, you are looking at what value it will provide to you in future going forward. And because the future is uncertain, nobody can be really sure as to how the future is going to fan out. It can at best be only an estimate of the value that you seek to derive by estimating and engaging in the process of valuation of an asset. Valuation is nothing but arriving at the estimate of the value of an asset, which is the monetary worth of future benefits one is going to have by acquiring an asset today. If you acquire a particular stock or a share today from the market at a price of 1,000 rupees, and this share had moved from 800 to 1,000 over the period of last 2 months, there is no guarantee that the same kind of upward trend will continue in this particular stock or share. But nonetheless, you have expectation of future economic benefits likely to arise from this particular share. That's why you have decided to put your money on bet in this particular stock, in this particular share at this particular point of time. So valuation essentially is all about looking at the monetary worth of future benefits that someone can have by acquiring an asset or a liability or a business at this point of time in due course of time. Valuation depends upon a lot of factors, but the 3 key determining factors determining valuation: 1, who is doing valuation? Second is, why valuation? What is the purpose of carrying out valuation? Valuation may be required for very many different purposes. Valuation could be required for mergers and acquisition. Valuation may be required by the companies under the Companies Act 2013. Valuation may also be required for offering of ESOPs, employee stock option plan to the employees. Valuation may also be required in case of split of a partnership firm or a Hindu undivided family. What is the purpose of valuation also determines how the value is going to be arrived at. And then it is also important to identify the timing of valuation, when the valuation is being carried out. If you look at the value of any company and compare that value with the value prevailing in 2019 with the value of the company today, you will find huge difference in the value of the company because of the COVID-19 pandemic interval in between. Some of the businesses would have gone up in terms of value. Some of the businesses would have gone down in terms of value depending upon the sector into which the company or the industry belongs to, because COVID-19 pandemic has had differing impacts on various sectors. Some sectors have been benefited, some sectors have been negatively impacted. It all depends which sector you are talking about. Now, as I mentioned, under IBC, for a company under CIRP, valuation is required to be carried out by a person who is technically known as a registered valuer. The concept of registered valuer was introduced by the Companies Act of 2013 under section 247, which provides that any valuation required under the Companies Act or under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 can be performed only by a person who is the registered valuer and not by anyone else. Let me clarify further that this provision of appointment of registered valuers is yet not applicable in the case of any other valuation under any other law or legislation other than the Companies Act and the IBC. If you need to get a valuation done for SEBI regulations, for FEMA, for Competition Commission of India, for income tax, anyone can do the valuation. It is not necessary to engage a person who is a qualified registered valuer. But for Companies Act matters and IBC, it is mandatory to have a registered valuer to be appointed for the purpose of carrying out valuation of the assets. Of course, the person to be appointed as registered valuer under IBC has to be an independent person so that he can provide an objective assessment or estimate of the value of assets of the corporate debtor. And in order to maintain independence of the registered valuer, it is therefore provided that relative of the resolution professional, any related party of the corporate debtor, auditor of the corporate debtor, a partner or director of the insolvency professional entity shall not be appointed as the registered valuer, even if he is otherwise eligible and qualified to be appointed. Having been licensed as the registered valuer, still we are not going to appoint him because of that kind of negative disqualification provided for under the code. Under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, 2 registered valuers are to be appointed for determining the value of 3 different assets falling under 3 different asset classes: land and building, plant and machinery, securities of financial assets, and that's where the importance of Regulation 27 and Regulation 35 become very, very important in this particular context. Now, the 2 registered valuers appointed under IBC, Regulation 27, read with Regulation 35, they are supposed to arrive at 2 different set of values: a fair value and a liquidation value. A fair value is arm's length price kind of concept, which states that the price at which the asset would be exchanged between a buyer and a seller, where both the buyers and sellers have complete knowledge about the market, they are willing to enter into a transaction, and there is no pressure on either one of them. The price at which the asset would be exchanged between the 2 parties in such a manner is what is identified as the fair value. And one of the important basis for determining fair value is the concern and assumption of going concern of the business. Assuming that the business is going to carry on its business, it's going to stay in the market for a long period of time, what is the fair price at which the asset or the business assets are to be exchanged between seller and buyer at an arm's length basis? That's what is the concept of fair value. Liquidation value, on the other hand, as the word indicates, the basis for arriving at liquidation value is the realizable value of the assets as if the business is going to close down, as on the insolvency commencement date. If the business was to be closed down, if the business was to go into liquidation, what would be the value which would be able to be derived by selling out all the assets of the company? That's what is given by the liquidation value. The valuations, both fair value and liquidation value, provided by 3 different asset classes registered valuers, can be shared with the committee of creditor members only after taking an undertaking from them that they will maintain complete confidentiality with regard to these valuation figures and not divulge them to anyone else for that matter. How the valuation is conveyed by the registered valuers? Valuation is carried out by them by looking at financial records, by looking at other supporting documents and evidence, and also by carrying out physical inspection or physical verification of the various assets of the company. On that basis, valuation is arrived at by the registered valuers. How will the value be conveyed to the resolution professional? The value estimation arrived at by the registered valuers is conveyed to the resolution professional by way of a detailed, comprehensive, and well-structured valuation report. Valuation report is the end result of the process of carrying out valuation of the assets of a corporate debtor. It has to be structured in a proper manner. It must indicate certain basic contents which are mandatorily required to be stated in the valuation report, which have been provided for under the valuation rules and which are also provided for under caveats, limitations, and disclaimer guidelines provided for by Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. All those contents need to be properly mentioned in the valuation report before it is provided to the resolution professional in respect of a company undergoing corporate insolvency resolution process. The end result of the valuation process or assignment, the final shape in which the report is going to emerge is, it will provide the name of the client. It will also mention who are the intended users, who are the people who are actually going to use this report or use this valuation number which has been provided by a registered valuer, and also mention the purpose of valuation. It could be for the purpose of mergers and acquisition. It could be for Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code CIRP. You got to clearly mention the purpose of valuation. Then in the second para or second section of the report, you're going to talk about description of the client company, description of the assets and liabilities, the financial matters, the legal affairs, the tax matters. Then you have to provide description about the financial position of the company in terms of past results, past financial statements, the budgets with underlying assumptions, the review of budgets for plausibility, checking whether they are achievable, realistic or not, and also statement of responsibility for the information provided by the management of the corporate debtor or by the resolution professional to the registered valuer for the purposes of coming out with the valuation report. Then coming to another section of valuation report where you have to mention what are the different bases of valuation which have been used. Have you used the going concern basis? Have you used the liquidation value basis? What is the valuation date? Because valuation differs from date to date, period to period. It's like the balance sheet. Balance sheet is prepared as at a particular date on 31st of March every year, end of the financial year. The position of assets and liabilities of the company as on 1st of April would be different. Again, as on 30th of March would be different, but the balance sheet is prepared as on 31st of March, a precise date. Similarly, valuation is also carried out as on a precise date, that is the insolvency commencement date. Then you have to also mention description of the various assets which have been valued, the principles which have been followed, the valuation methods which have been used, valuation approaches which have been followed. Now here it is also important to note there are three essential approaches to carrying out valuation. You have the income approach, you have the cost approach, and you have the market approach. First is, as a registered valuer, you have to identify which particular one approach or which particular two or maybe all the three approaches you would be using for carrying out valuation in a particular assignment, and then decide upon the particular thing and give reasons for that. Why did you choose the income approach to valuation in a particular case? And the other two approaches which you have decided not to apply in a particular assignment, you again have to provide sufficient justification for not using the other two approaches in a particular case. So you have to give justification for using a particular approach and also for not using the other approaches which are available to you as a registered valuer in a particular case. Appropriate and credible valuation is critical for the insolvency and bankruptcy code matters. Otherwise, what will happen is a viable company which is rescuable, which can be put back into operation, might get pushed into liquidation, or vice versa, an unviable company might be rescued. Both of these two situations will not provide the desired and required social and economic outcomes. So the point is that valuation is very, very essential. It is essentially the edifice on which the entire structure of IBC has been built, because if the valuation is not proper, the end result of the CIRP process or the liquidation decision taken by the committee of creditors may not be in the best interest of all the stakeholders concerned. Thank you.
आसाम की विशालता केवल ब्रह्मपुत्र नदी तक सीमित नहीं है, बल्कि यहाँ के सांस्कृतिक वातावरण में भी दिखाई देती है।
यही वह कामरूप है जिसकी गाथा पौराणिक कहानियों में भी पाई जाती है।
मैं कामरूप हूँ। मैं साक्षी हूँ उस पौराणिक काल का। प्रभु महादेव की करुणा से मुझ में ही कामदेव को नया जीवन मिला, इसलिए मैं कामरूप हूँ।
ऐसी ही एक पौराणिक गाथा जुड़ी है आसाम के गुवाहाटी में स्थित मां कामाख्या देवी के मंदिर के साथ।
प्रतिदिन यहाँ हजारों की संख्या में श्रद्धालु भक्त माँ कामाख्या के दर्शनों को प्राप्त करने के लिए समस्त संसार भर से यहाँ पर आते हैं।
जिस पहाड़ी पर मां कामाख्या का मंदिर स्थित है उसे नीलांचल पहाड़ कहते हैं। वर्तमान में मंदिर तक पहुंचने के लिए अति उत्तम मार्ग की व्यवस्था है।
परंतु एक समय ऐसा भी था जब लोगों को पत्थरों की सीढ़ियों पर चढ़कर वहां तक पहुंचना पड़ता था।
भक्ति के साथ साथ यह एक पर्यटन स्थल भी है। यहाँ के स्थानीय निवासी इसी पर्यटन से अपनी आजीविका भी चलाते हैं। हर वर्ष आषाढ़ माह में मंदिर के द्वार कुछ समय बंद रखने की परंपरा है, जिसे अम्बुवासी कहते हैं। अम्बुवासी के दौरान देश भर से लाखों भक्तजन यहाँ पर आकर रात बिताते हैं।
मंदिर खुलते ही भक्तजन माँ कामाख्या के दर्शन कर लेते हैं।
Namaskar learners, welcome to this session in which we shall be discussing culture, society and social change. Change, it is said, is the law of life. Society and culture, particularly in contemporary times, have witnessed changes of huge proportions and at an unprecedented rate. This has had a profound impact upon our lifestyles, our customs, beliefs, traditions, networks and relationships. Against this backdrop of change and flux, the study of folklore and culture becomes particularly interesting and complex. The realities of migration, urbanization, globalization, environmental degradation and climate change have made profound changes in the way we lead our everyday lives, and they cannot be ignored in any study of this dimension. Even the very notion of culture has come under a good deal of contestation and critique. We may ask, what is culture? Can the idea of culture as something which is homogeneous really be sustained in the contemporary times in the background of so much flux and so much change? These are some of the issues that we shall be discussing in the session. So let us begin right away by understanding the concept of culture. What is culture? Now, culture has got multiple meanings, and it is a term that is used in multiple disciplines also. So, for instance, even in the sciences, the term culture tends to be used. You have tissue cultures and so on and so forth. Culture is often used in ordinary parlance in day-to-day language as being something which concerns taste, refinement, high art. So we may speak of, Mr. X or Miss Y as being a person who is extremely cultured. So we really mean in common everyday language that this person is extremely educated, has got very refined manners, has got very refined tastes. However, when sociologists and anthropologists use the term culture, they are not referring only to high culture or the ways or the patterns of life of elite sections of society. In sociological and anthropological understandings, culture refers to the entire way of life of the community as a whole. The famous scholar Raymond Williams referred to culture as a whole way of life or a structure of feeling. By virtue of the fact that we live in a society, the fact that human beings live in a society, by definition implies that we are cultured or we are cultured beings. In other words, culture is something that is learned in the context of social life. Let's examine the very slight distinction between society and culture. Very often these terms are interchangeably used. However, there is, like I mentioned, a slight difference. Society refers to the social structure and organization. For instance, rural society, urban society, tribal society, and it refers to the various systems or the various structures that exist within these organizations. For example, caste, class, etc. However, society cannot exist without culture, and similarly, culture cannot exist without society, because within society, individuals follow certain common patterns of behavior, follow certain common practices, certain common beliefs, mores, norms, etc., all of which come under the ambit of culture. So we can say that society and culture are actually two sides of the same coin. Let us further examine some important definitions of culture. Now, one of the oldest definitions of culture in social anthropology was given by E.B. Tyler way back in the year 1871, but it is a definition that we use to this day. So culture, as per this definition, is that complex whole comprising knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. So if we look at this definition for a minute, we can immediately see that this definition of culture is rooted in an understanding of culture being something that we learn as members of society. And it actually comprises or it covers so many capabilities that it is in a sense a kind of a hold-all definition of culture. There is nothing that is really excluded in this definition. Another very important definition by Haviland is culture is a set of rules or standards that, when acted upon by the members of a society, produce behavior that falls within a range of variance the members consider proper and acceptable. So this definition of culture is actually emphasizing the ways in which human beings behave as members of society, the cultural practices, the norms, the values that they follow as members of society. And of course, human beings are all different. No two human beings are the same. And society also accepts different kinds of behavior or differences in thinking and feeling and acting. However, there is a certain range beyond which society frowns upon or disapproves of behavior that goes beyond these limits or goes beyond certain standards. So it's very important to note that culture is something that we learn as human beings, and it is also something whose definitions or an understanding of which is shared by most of the members of society. What are some of the important characteristics of culture? Now, you would already have understood this from our earlier discussion. So as we have repeatedly mentioned, culture is socially learned and transmitted. And there are two important concepts that we use over here: socialization and acculturation. Their meanings are almost synonymous. So, as members of society, right from our earliest childhood, as we are growing up, we learn to imbibe and internalize certain ways of thinking, certain ways of acting, certain ways of behaving. For example, in a society such as ours, where there is a great deal of respect that is accorded to elders, children grow up with the belief that elders must be treated in a particular manner. In certain communities, you find that touching the feet of the elders is seen as something that children learn at a very early age. So various ways of behaving are internalized or learned by us right from the time we are children, and we continue building upon these behaviors as we grow up in society. Culture also provides the means for human beings to satisfy needs. Now, all human beings have certain basic needs: the need for hunger, the need for procreation, the need for sleep, etc. However, the way in which these needs are met is different from the way in which, say, animals fulfill these needs. Human beings have got socially approved or socially sanctioned ways of fulfilling these needs. So, for example, every society has certain restrictions or certain do's and don'ts about the kind of food that is eaten. The way in which, say, a man and a woman or a couple get together or meet. So practices regarding marriage, practices regarding dating, and so on and so forth. These are all determined by the culture, or these are all in a way set by the culture. So society and culture provide us with the means of satisfying these basic needs. And as we have also mentioned, culture provides or prescribes to us certain standards or norms of behavior which we are expected to follow. And violation of these norms is usually met with by disapproval, in some cases by punishment. So depending upon the seriousness or the sanctity of the norm, the punishment or the consequence for breaking that norm may vary from culture to culture. Very, very important point, which is closely related to the ongoing discussion and what we're going to be talking about later, is that culture is not static. It is not frozen in time. It is not something that is unchanging. It is constantly evolving and changing, and these changes are based upon a variety of factors, or these changes are the result of various factors about which we shall discuss a little later. Now, a very important distinction is also made when we talk about culture: the material aspect and the non-material aspect. So we speak about material as well as non-material culture. Now, material culture refers to all the objects, artifacts, tools, structures that are very much a part and parcel of a particular society. So this could include weapons, this could include kitchen utensils, this could include dresses, food, etc., etc. All that is material in nature. There is also a non-material aspect of culture, namely the ideas, values, and beliefs that impart meaning. Material and non-material culture, even though we do make the analytical distinction, it is actually very difficult to really tell them apart or really make the separation. For instance, if you take an item of dress, take, say, a sari which is white, a white unadorned sari has a very, very different meaning in, say, a Hindu cultural context than would be an extremely beautifully decorated or a brightly colored sari. Similarly, if you see the color white, it has a very different connotation for a bride in Western culture. So you see that bridal dress in the West, in a Christian community, tends to be white, whereas in our context, a lady or a girl wearing a white dress for a wedding would be considered inauspicious. So there are many, many beliefs and values which help us to make sense of different items of material culture. Take another example. Take a school building. A building is basically a brick and mortar structure. A school building may have other things like blackboards, chalk, books, pens, pencils, etc. All of these are material culture. But the non-material component is the concept of education, the value that is accorded to education. So without all of us, or without the society being committed to the concept of education, of acquiring education in a school, this building, this chalk, this blackboard, etc. would really have no meaning. So we see that the material and the non-material dimensions of culture are both intimately intertwined and only make sense in the context of each other. We can make further distinctions when we talk about culture. So there are many concepts like high culture, popular culture, and folk culture. So what do we mean by high culture? As I had alluded to earlier, high culture refers to art, literature, etc., which is patronized by the elite sections of society. And this high culture really tended to be created when there were rich patrons who would enable the artists to create works of art. And we see this in almost all ancient societies. So high culture is something that is restricted to a very small section of society to partake in. In direct contrast, you have what we call popular culture. Popular culture is also often described as mass culture. Mass culture or popular culture is something that is embraced by the larger majority of society. And in the contemporary context, we find that mass culture or popular culture tends to be driven by consumption, it tends to be driven by the mass media, and it reflects the tastes and fashions of the majority of the period. So we have mass media which promotes entertainment. Entertainment also includes cooking, literature, clothes, sports, fashion, music, etc. So you just have to look at some of the programs that are telecast on television today to understand really what popular culture is all about. It is packaged, it is commercially viable, and it is expressed through circulation in large numbers. And we find that popular culture and mass culture, the massification of culture, is something that is very much a consequence or very much a product of contemporary industrial society. And in a globalized society, we find that mass culture and certain cultural trends, certain fashions, certain tastes, certain ways of behaving have really acquired a mass character. They are circulated, they are consumed, they are considered trendy. And there is a whole way of analyzing and looking at these phenomena. And we find that the discipline of cultural studies is very, very much dedicated or very, very much devoted into understanding these contemporary phenomena and in understanding popular or mass culture. Let's talk now about folk culture. Now, folk culture refers to the traditions and customs of a particular community or society that is reflected in the local lifestyle. Now, we find that folk culture is usually transmitted from generation to generation through oral traditions, and it involves or it is imbued with a strong feeling of community. Folk culture has a very strong sense of place. It is deeply rooted in the cultural context. It is deeply rooted in the local context. However, it's very interesting that folk culture has also influenced high and mass culture too. Many of its features have become a part of both. So if we see, for instance, folk songs or folk dresses, folk fashions have actually received a great deal of interest and circulation through globalization. They have become high fashions now. So we find that this distinction between high, popular, and folk, this is also something which is subject to interpretation, subject to discussion, and we have to contextualize it and look at different aspects of these three categories very carefully, and also look at it within our own context. I'm now going to talk about something very, very important, particularly in the context of the contemporary world, and that is the concept of cultural diversity. Now, cultural diversity implies two things. First of all, it implies the existence of native cultures in every part of the world. So traditionally, the concept of culture in anthropology and sociology used to be understood as a particular lifestyle or a particular way of a particular group of people, which was distinct from the rest or which distinguished them from the rest. And if you see the history of anthropology, you will find that multiple studies, what we call ethnographic studies, have been undertaken of cultures and societies that are very far away from Western culture and society, that are in remote and inaccessible parts of the world. So many tribal communities, many forest-dwelling communities in different parts of the world, whether in Asia, Africa, South America, etc., have been studied in great detail by anthropologists who have tried to understand the ways of living and the various aspects of everyday life, their customs, their traditions, their beliefs, etc., and presented them to the world. And a very important aspect of this also is the fact that cultures cannot be described as superior or inferior. One of the important fundamental tenets of anthropology is that all cultures are considered to have relevance and importance depending upon their own local communities. So we call this cultural relativism. There is no demarcation of cultures as superior or inferior. Each culture is important, is relevant, is tailored to the lifestyle of its particular community. So this is the way in which cultures have been studied, particularly with reference to smaller groups. But what about the contemporary times? What about the fact that today there is so much migration, there is so much movement of people from one part of the world to the other? So migrant or immigrant cultures across the globe present an immense challenge for social scientists and other scholars to study. We see that the improvement in the means of transport and communication and the integration of the world economy through colonialism, capital, and globalization have resulted in unprecedented movements or migrations of people. We find that countries like the USA, Canada, Britain, they've become nations of migrants and immigrants. And the term melting pot or mosaic of cultural diversity is often used to describe these societies. You will also be familiar with the term diaspora. So the diaspora is used to denote major dispersions of populations, people who may disperse to different parts of the world due to various reasons, war and persecution, or slavery and human trafficking as happened in earlier times, and more recently, economic opportunity. Also during the colonial period, we saw a great deal of movement of people from one part of the world to the other to fulfill the colonial economic agenda. And we find that Indian diasporic communities are a very, very interesting site for study and analysis of culture. For instance, communities in the West Indies, Malaysia, Fiji, etc., they were recruited as plantation laborers in the British colonies. And these migrant groups retained elements of their native culture and their emotional ties with the homeland. So, for instance, we see that Bhojpuri as the local language which was used by these migrants is still very much something that is precious, considered extremely precious, worth preserving by migrant communities in the West Indies. And the various genres of music, of poetry, etc., which have evolved to keep their local languages alive and to keep their connections with the homeland alive. So this is a very, very interesting area for study, or very, very interesting area for research for those who are interested in folklore and culture. Let's now talk about culture, society, and change. Human societies, as I've mentioned, are characterized by change, but there are two processes always underway: continuity and change. Now, while continuity is crucial or critical in maintaining the social order, change, as we've said before, is the law of life and a feature of human existence. Change, it is often said, is the only constant. So while societies also need to have certain continuities in order that the day-to-day life of society may proceed in a harmonious fashion, a society which does not change, or a society where there is no change, is doomed to die. The term change refers to significant alterations over time in the organization, structure, and functions of society, its behavior patterns, its cultural norms and values. So change may be everyday change, the small, almost unnoticeable change. Changes may also be large-scale change, which are noticeable, which are very, very significant, and which really make enormous implications, or which have enormous implications for the life of society. So change is both at a very small and a micro level, as well as at a larger level. What are some of the important factors of social change? So very quickly, we can speak about the physical environment. I had earlier mentioned environmental degradation and climate change. These are very, very important, and particularly in the contemporary times, we find that a good deal of devastation is wrought by climatic events, which causes sometimes whole communities to migrate from place to place. We find that the physical environment really, in a sense, places certain limitations on the way in which human societies and cultures can exist. Demographic factors are also extremely important. So as the population increases or decreases, as the sex ratio changes, there may be various changes in relationships, various changes in the way in which the society conducts its business. So demographic factors or population is also a very, very important factor in creating or in causing social change. Technology is also an extremely important factor, and we only need to think about the kind of enormous changes that, for instance, the internet or web-based technologies have caused in our lives in terms of the way we work, in terms of the way we interact with people. The world has become a much smaller place. We are able to keep contact with people who may be very far away. The recent pandemic has resulted in a whole concept of online working or working from home through the modalities of the e-technologies that have become so much a part and parcel of our lives in recent times. And cultural factors are also very, very important in social change. So societies change when culture or when cultural patterns, cultural beliefs, cultural values create circumstances or create situations which facilitate change. Let's quickly talk about some of the important historical processes that have led to social change. So industrialization and modernization. If you look at the Industrial Revolution in Europe and the growth of industrialization in the non-Western and developing world, we find that it has set off a wave of changes in almost all aspects of human life, including work, family, leisure, healthcare, medicine, class, caste, gender relations, and political processes. Urbanization, which is also a fallout or an offshoot of industrialization, while on the one hand it is associated with a modern lifestyle, we also find that on the negative side, urbanization has brought with it extreme poverty, squalor, insanitary living conditions, and also created a great deal of social unrest in terms of marital and family breakdown, decline of moral values, and feelings of anonymity and isolation. And we see that the changes in the socio-cultural patterns and interrelationships that happen as a consequence of urbanization make the individual a relatively free agent who can make independent decisions. So while on the one hand this fosters the individual's freedom and creativity, it also leads to a breakdown in interpersonal relations. It also leads to a breakdown in traditional bonds and obligations. For instance, we see the impact on caste relations, community, and gender relations. Secularization is also a very, very important factor in social change, or one of the very, very important historical processes, wherein we find that science and rationality have really occupied a very important position in the life of society. So, for instance, these have replaced traditional beliefs, traditional thinking, in the minds of people who inhabit societies which are undergoing change and modernization. Modernization leads to the replacement of supernatural or religious belief systems with the practices of modern science. However, there is a great deal of qualification to be made over here. There is a great deal of discussion that is to be made in this context regarding the persistence of traditional beliefs and the way in which modern science is adopted, or the uptake of modern science. And particularly in the context of societies like India, very, very interesting and complex situations result. Globalization is also a very, very important historical process that has led to social change. Globalization basically refers to the interconnectedness of economic, cultural, and political processes and systems. When we speak about culture, we find that cultural globalization, that is the spread and influence of language, culture, fashions, food, music, etc., especially with the arrival of internet technologies, has created a significant change in the way we enact our lives, in the way in which we dress, the way we eat, and so on and so forth. So cultural globalization is a very, very important topic for discussion when we speak about folklore and culture studies. A quick look at social change in India. So change and continuity have marked the Indian experience, and because of our long civilizational history, assimilation, adaptation, and resilience in the face of crisis has been the hallmark of Indian society. Has change started happening only in contemporary times in India? Certainly not. Change is something that has been ongoing even in the pre-colonial times. And one of the important processes identified by the anthropologist M.N. Srinivas is that of Sanskritization, wherein social groups try to rise up the ladder of mobility or improve their position in the social hierarchy by trying to emulate or copying the ways of life and behavior of groups that are superior to them in the hierarchy. This is reflected, for instance, when we talk about the tribe-caste continuum. It is rooted in the concept of folk and urban, and the way in which tribal communities and their nearby peasant or rural communities have always been in a process of interaction and mutual influences. We see the diffusion of cultural traits and constant interaction, wherein several tribes have become assimilated with different castes at different levels of the caste system. So Srinivas did not speak about individual mobility. He spoke about the mobility of the entire group. And when we study the way in which tribal communities have interacted with the local peasant communities, we find that change is something that has very much been a part and parcel of life in India. To conclude, we can say that culture, society, and change are fundamental concepts in the interdisciplinary domain of folklore and culture studies. And by attempting to understand the process of socio-structural and historical transformations, we can contextualize the changing dimensions and expressions of folklore and culture. Thank you.
आइए अब आपको दिखाते हैं एक गीत जिसे गा रही हैं विदुश्री पांडे।
है मेरे प्यारे वतन, है मेरे बिछड़े चमन, तुझ पे दिल कुर्बान, तू ही मेरी आरज़ू, तू ही मेरी आबरू, तू ही मेरी शान, है मेरे प्यारे वतन, है मेरे बिछड़े चमन, तुझ पे दिल कुर्बान। तेरे दामन से जो आए उन हवाओं को सलाम, तेरे दामन से जो आए उन हवाओं को सलाम, चूम लूँ मैं उस ज़ुबां को जिस पे आए तेरा नाम, सबसे प्यारी सुबह तेरी, सबसे रंगी तेरी शाम, तुझ पे दिल कुर्बान, तू
Hello, dear viewer. Today we'll discuss about role of SDG in present day context. As you know, the School of Extension and Development Studies have three MA program: MA in Development Studies, MA in Urban Studies, and MA in Corporate Social Responsibilities. And in all these programs, sustainable development is one of the important concept, and it has been discussed in the unit called sustainable development, the challenges, the current challenges. So in order to discuss this topic today, I have myself, Professor B.K. Patnaik, and my colleague Dr. Sarada Prasad will discuss about this important topic. And as you know, before coming to the sustainable development goal, why there is need for sustainable development goal? Because when all these countries, the Commonwealth countries or all the countries, they get independent after the Second World War, particularly the African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries, and Caribbean countries, before them there was host of problem: illiteracy, unemployment, inequality, ill health, insanitation, lack of proper housing, lack of sanitation. A host of problems were there, and these are the developmental problems. But all the developed countries, through the economic growth, they had already attained. Developed countries like Japan, UK, USA, and all the European countries, most of the European countries, they had attended the development, all the development goal as far as education, health, their infrastructure development is concerned. But before all these countries, all the developing countries or underdeveloped countries, they used to call at that point of time the third world countries. Development was the key issue, because all these are indicators of development: education, health, sanitation, infrastructure development, employment, the sustainable employment, then income, all these are these were very challenging aspect before them. So in order to, they continue all those process, they continue. In 2000, what the UNDP, United Nations Development Program, they thought that they find, despite all the assistance from the World Bank and different agencies, because in 1945 two great institutions, World Bank and IMF, came. They helped these countries for in different aspects: education, health, agriculture, industrialization, on all the aspects. But eradication of poverty is one of the very main important problem in these countries. But despite all these things, it was found that all these poverty, inequality, unemployment, illiteracy, then health, all these aspects were not improved adequately. So in 2001, the UNDP launched the Millennium Development Program, because, and as you will see that Millennium Development Program, these are the various, because there are various indicators. They thought that to improve all these indicators like education, the extreme poverty, eradication of poverty and hunger, then primary education, improvement of primary education, also the universalization of primary education, then empowerment of women and promote gender equality in health and reduce the maternal mortality rate, then child and maternal mortality rate, then HIV AIDS. At that point of time, HIV AIDS was very critical issue, one of the critical issue in the African countries and also in the Asian countries. So the goal was to reduce the HIV AIDS, then promote environmental sustainability. As you know, the environment is a key issue. Now environmental pollution, water pollution, air pollution, land pollution, and even ocean pollution, reduction of biodiversity, all these are very critical issues in these countries. Then there was, in order to attain this, there was a need for partnership between the partnership between the developing countries, among the developing countries, also among the developed and developing countries. All these 8 goals. So Millennium Development Goals are 8 goals fixed by the United Nations to attain by all the developing country, because as far as developed country is concerned, they have already achieved, and they are already in higher So if you see that Millennium Development Goal, that in order to reduce the poverty, income is less than $1.25. At that point of time, we had a poverty rate more than even 30%. As far as $1.25 is concerned, India had more than 35% of the people above the poverty line. So the goal was to reduce the poverty below the 21%. Then achieve the 100% universalization of primary education. So the second goal was universalization of primary education, that is 100% students should attain the primary education. Then gender disparity, reduce the third target was reduce or eliminate gender disparity in education between male and female. Then fourth was reduce under 5 child mortality rate, and to reduce child mortality rate below 34. But for 1000 children, you have to reduce it. The death rate must be less than 34 and less than 5-year age. Then to reduce maternal mortality less than 120 for 1 lakh childbirth. Then also to eradicate malaria, HIV/AIDS and other diseases, and promote environmental sustainability. So these are the 6-7 goals that was fixed by the United Nations, and it was urged that all the developing countries by 2015 they should attain all the targeted goals. But it was found that all the goals were not attained. So in 2015, the United Nations UNDP enhanced this goal, Millennium Development Goal, to Sustainable Development Goal. So now it is the Sustainable Development Goal, and there are 17 goals that has been fixed by the United Nations Development Program to be attained by the developing country by 2030. So all the nations have been given 17 targets to be achieved, 17 goals to be achieved by 2030. So let us see what is sustainable development. So before coming to the sustainable development goal, we must know what is sustainable development. Sustainable development is the development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So whatever we are doing, sustainable development means whatever developmental activities we are doing today, we must see that it must not hamper the well-being of the future generation. I am giving an example because why the United Nations agencies, why the government is more concerned about the sustainable development, about the environment. I am giving an example. When Green Revolution started in Punjab in 1969-70, there was excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides, then mechanization of agriculture. With these interventions, the productivity enhanced by even the agricultural growth rate at that point of time was more than 10% even, and the country achieved food security and everything. What is happening today? Because what they had done in 1969-70, excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides, the impact is seen in now, because the studies show that nearly 20 to 25% of the land has become waterlogged. They are not used for cultivation. And even many agencies, they want the productivity, the wheat and rice, what has been produced by the states, they are of low quality. The content of all these kind of urea and all these pesticides, all these kind of very high. So almost their agricultural growth rate is stagnated, less than 2% over several decades, 1 or 2 decades. That means whatever they have done yesterday, today they are finding. So that must not be happen. Many of the people, they are migrating to the countries. The state is facing a lot of problem. Like that, another example I will be giving. Take the case of Uttarakhand. When there was 1988, I know in 1988 when I came to Delhi, and for the 7 years, I find there was no cloud burst in Uttarakhand. Now you will see every year there is cloud burst and people are suffering. Because if you see that as compared to Himachal Pradesh, the urban population of Uttarakhand, it has become almost 30%. We must see that in hill areas, how much people, how many percentage of people should we stay in the cities or urban areas. Quick urbanization in those hill states affecting the life of the people and also environmental health. So all these are the environmental sustainability. That means whatever we are doing today, we must see that tomorrow what will be its impact. So this is the sustainable development meaning, and sustainable development has an interaction between environment, economy and the society, ecology and the society. Ecology, economy and the society. There must be healthy relationship. The economy should not be, the economical development or economic development or development should not affect the ecology. The society, the population growth must not affect the ecology and the economy. So there must be healthy relationship between economy, ecology and society. So this says that the key component of sustainable development is economy, ecology and society. And if you see that what are the objective of sustainable development goal, that the economy should ensure basic need. What are the basic need to the people? That means food, clothing, shelter, safe drinking water, sanitation and social security to its people. The ecological balance, the proper balance between ecology and population. As I gave you example of Uttarakhand, how population growth has affected urban areas is affecting the health of the ecology in that states. Then the societal, the infant maternal mortality rate should be reduced, and fertility and diseases all must be kept check. So these are the objective of sustainable development goal. And if you see that in 1987, when the sustainable development was defined, the Brundtland report, they say that we must have a political system which promotes people's participation. So people should know whatever we are doing, the government should properly aware to the people that whatever being done, it must be get the participation of the people. Then economic system that must be self-reliant. We must bring a self-reliant, build a self-reliant economy. Then social system that must promote social harmony. There must not be discord between the society. Social networking should be good, so that society, everybody feels safe in the society. The production system must be ecologically sustainable. As I told you, in case of Punjab, excessive use of fertilizer and pesticides to enhance productivity has affected the soil health. That should not be. That is one angle of production system should be ecological friendly, and then eco-friendly and ecological. It must promote ecology rather than destroy the ecological system. Then technological system that must be continuously provide new solutions, because you see the technology, if you don't technology innovate and promote technological development, then economy will stagnate. So in all sphere there is need for technological improvement. Then international system must be participatory, and it must promote healthy trade and financing system between countries, and administrative system should be flexible. So in order to attain sustainable development goal, they are designed that economic system, social system, administrative system, political system should maintain certain type of coherence, or certain type of adhere to certain types of principles, so that sustainable development goal is attained. And if you see that there are 17 sustainable development goals, and all these goals, if I summarize, all those goals are eradication of poverty, to reduce the poverty below 21%. Then hunger, reduction of hunger and food insecurity. That is provide food security to all the people. So a reduction of hunger. Then health, reduction of infant mortality and maternal mortality. Then education, attainment of universalization of primary education and raising the level of education, the women empowerment in the reduction of maternal mortality and gender disparity in education and health. Then energy, sustainable energy is very important, because as you saw, the use of all these crude oils, it has polluted the environment. The level of environmental pollution in Delhi, you will find that how much in most of the cities. So sustainable energy, clean energy is one of the goals of sustainable development, attain the goal. The sustainable infrastructure must be sustainable and resilience, so that it promotes trade, it must market economy, it helps the market economy. Then inequality, reduction of inequality between intra-country and inter-country inequality within the state. If you see that within the state also there are a lot of inequality. Maharashtra, Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, they enjoy their per capita income and their per capita national income higher as compared to the state like Bihar, Assam, Odisha, Chhattisgarh. So how to reduce inequality, inter and interstate inequality? Then promote resilient and cities. Now we are going for the smart city, and smart cities should be a resilient cities. It must be disaster prone cities. It must be disaster resilient, and smart cities should provide good quality of life of the people. Then consumption must be subsistence consumption, because subsistence consumption will lead to more production will lead to more income lead to more saving lead to more investment lead to more production. It will be a cycle. So it will lead to capital formation. Your consumption should lead to capital formation, so that economic development, and there is a sustainability of economic growth. That is what is. Then climate change. As you know, there is a global warming, and climate change is one of the big issues nowadays in both developed and developing countries, and particularly in developing countries because of global warming. And this climate change, resilient climate change, how to deal with the climate change, that must be more the country should look forward. Then marine system, there must not be a pollution of the marine, our seas should be very pollution free. And ecosystem, you must have a very sustainable ecosystem. Ecology must be maintained. Biodiversity, as you will find now the bird like sparrows are not being seen. I have seen in my old while I was a child, there was vultures. Whenever there is a carcass, they used to eat everything. Now there was no. Now it is very difficult to find a vulture at the village level, because of excessive use of pesticides and these manures, which the agricultural things which the animals they eat. It causes affect the health of the vulture. Many of the birds are vanishing, many of the fishes are vanishing, many of the plants are also not surviving. This is a critical stage. If you go to the village, because while I was in my village, there were so many livestock. There are near about each household in my village, there were 5-6 cows and bullock for cultivation. Now when I am going now today, we don't have any cows. And many villages, hardly you will find 30-40 livestock. What will happen tomorrow? That's why there is a pollution everywhere. If your cattle population is go down and milk production, your demand for milk is higher, then automatically there will be contamination. They will adding urea and all those things. This is what is happening. So you have to see ecological balance. All these plants, all these animals, they are for our well-being. How many snakes are vanishing? Everything in the work. So you have to see, and there must be institutional cooperation. The Panchayati Raj institutions, the youth club, the Mahila Mandal, whatever the institution there at the grassroots level, they must try to promote the ecology. Promote sustainable development. They must be educated about what is sustainable development and all the indicators of sustainable development, and they should try. So there is institutional cooperation, institutional endeavor to attain the sustainable development goal. So if you see that what are the factors that influence sustainable development goal, there are many factors. You see, employment, you must provide sustainable employment. Income, if you have higher income, poverty will reduce. Poverty, inequality, education is one of the indicators, sustainable development. Health, another indicator. Infrastructure development. So, how infrastructure development will promote sustainable development goal? Because now, earlier we had infant mortality more than 100 in India. Now we have reduced to 22 because there are good roads. Earlier, when there was pregnant women finding any difficulty to go to the hospital because there was no good roads. So now in all the villages are connected with very good road. So immediately they are bringing to the hospitals, and infant mortality and maternal mortality has reduced to a great extent. So road is, and another thing, education. Now if you find in rural areas also, girl child, they are coming to the cities and getting education and going back to the house in the evening. So education, level of education among the girl children are enhanced, and the literacy and level of education. So infrastructure is one of the, and infrastructure like sanitation. Now India has 100% toilet household, and it has reduced the anemia. Earlier, the people used to go to the open field, and there is worm infection among the children. It was creating anemia. So all these are causes. So if you see the sustainable development goal, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, they have achieved higher rank in, and Assam, Jharkhand, and Bihar, they are lower rank. If Dr. Sarda, if you have any question to add.
Sir, you have cleared all about the MDG and SDGs. But sir, main difference, what is the MDG and SDG?
The SDG is an extension of MDG. So MDG had only 8 goals, while SDG had 17 goals. So the goals like climate change, sustainable infrastructure, these are all added into the MDG goal. So it is an extension of sustainable development goal, is an extension of MDG.
Yes, sir. Sir, we have achieved some of the goals and some not goals. Sir, what is the key challenges?
The key challenge is now, as far as it is concerned, our population control.
Okay, sir.
And how to reduce income inequality between the people. And second is climate change and environment. These are the very key issues what the government has to see. First to pollution, check the pollution, and climate change and environment is, and also control the population. That is very, because we cannot see that, we cannot yes, we consider population as dividend, but you have to see that how much it has the effect, negative effect, that has to be seen.
So sir, according to you, sir, government what type of the initiative?
The government has to take a lot of, as far as climate change is concerned, they have to promote sustainable energy, safe, clean energy, more electric vehicle, more kind of you see the non-pollutant energy. Then you have to take more steps how to control population growth and regional balance. They have to see that the state, the laggard, sustainable development good laggard states, as I told you, Bihar, Assam, and Jharkhand, and other states. They have to see the states which are lagging in sustainable development goal. More emphasis has to be given in those states, and more funds has to be given, and all the good practices that has happened in Kerala. If you see that in Kerala, MMR is 43. Maternal mortality rate, while Bihar it is 149. If you see the IMR, infant mortality rate, Kerala is only 6 compared to all the developed country, and and Bihar it is 5 times higher, 29. So they have to see the comparative analysis, all these state laggard states, and they have to take good practices, what is happening in all those good states, and accordingly they can progress.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So thank you all the viewers. And we discussed about the MDG and SDG, and next time we'll be coming with new topic. Thanks all of you.